What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the 1776 podcast. This week we have on JB Sauceda, who is probably most well known for his Instagram account, Texas Humor, but he's also the new host of Texas Country Reporter, which has been on, I think, 50 years and just a wonderful show. So I had a lot of fun talking about that, his background. JB is also a pilot, so we connected on that, and then he had some fun stories for us there. Also want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Rambler. They are a local Austin sparkling water company and just a really, really phenomenal company. So we're so thankful to have them on the show. So hope you guys enjoy. Well, JB, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, of course.
Coming on the podcast. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So my dad is always a Texas Country Reporter.
Uh-huh.
So I guess break that down for us. You're the new host. Is that what I hear correctly?
Yeah, Texas Country Reporter's been on for about 52 years, and the show was started by Bob Phillips up in Dallas, Fort Worth area as 4 Country Reporters. So it was on WFAA 4 up there, and he eventually syndicated it to the whole state. That's when it became Texas Country Reporter.
Okay. What year was that?
I forget, 52 years ago,
okay,
whatever.
So, okay.
Yeah. He's been doing it since then, and his wife Kelly joined, I think, within the last 5 to 10 years, something like that, as co-host.
Okay.
But they, he sold Phillips Productions to Texas Monthly a handful of years ago. And here recently, they decided to move on to, potentially, I think, doing their own show or something else elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I got a call from Texas Monthly, and me and a handful of other people applied for the role, and I got it in September. So
Nice.
I'll be taking over as the next host for season 53.
That's
Congrats.
awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So have you started filming episodes for it yet, or?
Yeah, we started about a month and a half ago in my hometown, and then we went back to Houston, kind of filmed in the Houston area 2 weeks ago, and then last week we were all throughout Central Texas. So I was in San Antonio, I was in New Braunfels, I was out in Spicewood and Dripping Springs. So yeah, I've been kind of all over the place. Well, next up will be West Texas in about 2 weeks. So,
Nice. Where's your hometown?
LaPorte, Southeast Houston.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How long have you been in Austin?
20 years now. Actually, this will be 21 years. So, it's been a while. So
Very cool.
At this point, I think I've been here longer than most people, outside of the handful of natives that are still left in town.
Yeah, you got a couple. We were both born and raised here,
Cool.
but it's pretty rare these days.
Yeah, then you guys are the only ones left, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I know almost everyone we grew up with, or most of the folks I know, they've all moved, or like my sister's in Denver. I mean, very few of us stayed, it feels like. So
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more of a transient city, I think, in ways than a lot of other towns around Texas. But I think some of that's also just a function of its size. I mean, there are a lot of people come and go in Houston and Dallas too, but it's just those are much bigger cities.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So is the show, is it on PBS, or where do you watch it these days?
It just depends on where you live. So if you go to
Okay.
the Texas Country Reporter website, texascountryreporter.com, we've got lists for each of the markets. It's on a different station, different network, depending upon where it is that you live. But my recommendation, and kind of one of the things that we're really trying to do is take it online more. For the younger generations, unless you watch broadcast TV, you're not sitting down at 10 o'clock on the Sunday morning or Friday night at 7 or whatever. It's people of younger generations tend to watch more streaming or watch it on YouTube when they've got the time or when something gets published. So that's my recommendation is, if you want to watch it on broadcast, go to Texas Country Reporter. You can see when it airs in your specific market. And then you can also go to the Texas Country Reporter website and see the full episodes there as well. So that's a fairly new, development, because historically, unless you watched it when it broadcast, you either needed to DVR it or, catch the individual segments on YouTube. But since Texas Monthly purchased it, one of the biggest moves that they made was to get full episodes now online on texascountryreporter.com. So
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And I feel like with today's age too, I mean, trying to take those episodes and turning them into 60-second clips is probably, we get a ton of eyeballs anyways too, trying to take out little parts from it and whatnot.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I tell people, and I made this comment last week to a group of people in Pecos, Texas, was that the shows, what makes the show special isn't the amount of time it's been on the air. The reason it has such staying power is the thing that makes it special, really, which is that it's slower and it's more deliberate in the time that it takes with people. It's kind of not intended to be a 30 or 60 second thing. Like if our hope now all that said, like our hope is that we can find ways to capture the essence of the show in those ways that then get people to sit down and watch the full deal. But
hook them in to go watch the whole thing.
Yeah, because the whole point of it is I mean, I'll step out of the show for a second and say, what do people do when they want to go on vacation? They live in Houston, Dallas, or San Antonio or something like that. They go drive to Waco, they go drive to Fredericksburg, and they go play small town for the weekend, right? Mm-hmm. People in the big cities, they're busy as all get out, and we go and we want to slow down. We want to take a break from this fast-paced life. And people now will go travel out. They'll go to the Deer Lease. They'll go out to Big Bend, and they want to go slow down. And our goal for the show is to continue doing what Bob, has done for a long time, which is to give people a sense of that, sliver of slower life, the country life, the small town life that, people are always talking about aspiring, and having nostalgia for. TCR is supposed to be that. And, we think that we can communicate that and give people a sense of it on TikTok and Instagram Reels and things like that. But our hope is that you kind of get a little preview. It's like the trailer for a movie. Mm-hmm. You get a little preview of what these people are about, what the subjects of the show are about, and then it gives you, sort of a desire to sit down and maybe it's over lunch, right? You're eating lunch at work and you decide, while I'm eating this meal, I'm going to watch this show and kind of get a little sliver of life out in the middle of nowhere or out, something special someone's doing. But we want to really meet our audience where they are, and to your point, there are a lot of eyeballs who that's how they watch TV, or they kind of get a sense for what they want to go watch by kind of seeing it on TikTok or whatever. So that's kind of our goal, and something we're going to start spending a lot of time doing. And so the core of the show is not going to change. It's still going to be about featuring ordinary Texans doing extraordinary things, but we're going to come up with some little interesting kind of vignettes and things that we'll do on some of these channels to get people excited about it and exploring more around the show itself and the people that we think are really interesting to feature.
That's great. So I mean, I'm not super familiar with the show. I mean, I've had several friends that they grew up on it. So I know for some people, if you grew up on it, it's one of those just classic staples of your
100%.
Childhood kind of thing. And so I guess as you go around as the show, it sounds like you're going small towns, interviewing business owners, restaurants, just interesting people. Is it really just kind of casting a wide net, or is it focused on any type of business or any type of people specifically?
Yeah, there are a couple of rules that we kind of established for ourselves that were based off of just how the show tells the story. There's always 3 segments within each episode, and it typically goes from there's a slightly more whimsical, kind of interesting person that's maybe got something kind of quirky or fun about what they do. There's a restaurant or sort of a destination type deal, and then there's maybe something a little bit more heartfelt. And the one unifying trait amongst all 3 of those segments is that it's got to be about a person. Where most of the other shows that you'll see out there on TV, whether it's Texas or really anywhere for that matter, it's kind of we're going to go down to this place and we're going to look at that, we're going to go eat this hamburger. Or we're going to go jump off the tallest, swimming slide or something in Texas. That's not really what TCR is about. We're going to go do some of those things, right? We may go to a water park or we may go to a restaurant. But what we're really concerned about is the people behind the people, place, and thing, right? So if we're going to go to a restaurant, is there some chef who's been cooking there for 40 years? Is it, some interesting story about a veteran who came home from, tour of duty and decided I'm going to go give back to my community in some way? Who are the people doing the cool things? That's really what, TCR does that is different than the rest of the shows out there. And even really from the show that I used to do back in the day, I used to do one called Yellow Texas, which Was around for about 7 years or so, and that one was awesome. I mean, we had a great time. I traveled all over the state. I flew planes, I swam in swimming holes, and did all kinds of fun stuff. Mm-hmm. But that show really, the name was YOLO. It was about like things that you can go do, right? Mm-hmm. TCR is these are people you should care about. That's really the essence of the show. So when people are like, hey, I've got an idea for a story, and they're pitching me on it, the rule I give them is like, it's got to be about a person. I love that you have a favorite restaurant, but if there's no interesting person there, it's not really a TCR story for us. Makes sense, yeah. It's got to. So I'll give you a really good example of one. Franklin Barbecue, right? Mm-hmm. Probably the most famous barbecue restaurant in Texas. I ran into Aaron Franklin the other night, and we were talking. He was like, "Oh yeah, TCR was down at our shop," and I was like, "I don't remember us doing a story on Franklin." And then it dawned on me, the story that we just did was on a guy who has eaten there over 100 times. And so he just joined I think they call it like the Franklin Barbecue 100 Club or something. And he's the first person being inducted into this club because he's like waited in line and he's eaten there 100 times.
Holy cow.
So that's pretty wild when you think about the number of hours you have to wait in line to eat that barbecue.
I like barbecue. I don't know if I do it that much.
Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting twist on like a thing. Like everybody's eating at Franklin Barbecue, right? The president's gone there. There was all kinds of stuff that's happened. But
have you eaten there?
Have you ever eaten there?
It's been a long time.
Yeah. Have you ever eaten there?
I have not.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it lives up to the kind of expectations. But it's a commitment to go wait in line, especially for the number of people that come in from out of town to go eat there and stuff. And so, but for us, a way to feature this and kind of both highlight the restaurant and just something kind of cool is to go focus on this guy and tell his story.
Kind of found a workaround to get in there and find that personal connection, which is nice.
Yeah, and just this past week we were down in San Antonio, kind of telling the story of the San Antonio airport through a very interesting person that does something that nobody even considers is a job. And this person has got the job of there are only 4 other people that do this specific job full-time elsewhere around the country.
Are you allowed to talk about it, or is it
no, you got to watch in September. Yeah, but I'm kind of like burying the lead a little bit because the point is like this guy has one of the coolest jobs I think on the planet. He's getting to work outdoors, work with animals, and do something that is just like in his genes, and he's saving lives and keeping people safe. It's a pretty cool job. And you would float through the airport every day and not think about this thing being a responsibility. And this is what this guy gets up and does every single day. Wow. And so that's our goal is like to, be the, the visual example of slowing down and, stopping to smell the roses, mm-hmm. Texas style. And so that's kind of the point of the show. But, it to the point you made about your friends or people that having grown up on it. Mm-hmm. Every person I meet, I mean, it's one of 3 things. It's either I've never heard of it, but I know who you are, JB, through Texas Humor, or it's I grew up watching that show with my grandparents or with my parents, or I don't watch it, but my mom called me and told me you're the next host and she's ecstatic, and so our goal is to try to make all 3 of those groups the same and bring a younger generation into the show, as our watching habits have changed and the younger generations don't sit down and watch TV that way, just to bring them into the fold, because I think that, anyone who watches this show will have that same kind of feeling that everybody who grew up watching it had, which is, man, this is a really cool way to see the state and like grow an appreciation for the really amazing people that live here doing some pretty cool stuff every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself doing it 50 years? You gonna try to carry the torch that long?
Bob had a slightly, he had a bit of a head start on me. I think he was 18 or 19 when he started the show.
Yeah. So he did that basically his entire. Is he
it's
still
been
alive?
his whole career. Yeah. He's still alive. Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. He's doing well, and he and Kelly are in great health, and they he's been doing it a long time, and has done a great job with it. Has won many Emmys and a lot of awards over the years for his work on the show, and has built quite the reputation. It's big shoes to fill for sure, to step in behind him.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Do you have I don't know if you can talk about it, but a favorite one that you've shot so far? I mean, is there anyone that stands out to you more than others?
What I can tell you is I'm really excited about the first episode, and we didn't want the first episode to be about me. I thought it'd be kind of silly for a show that's about other people to step in and say, let's do 30 minutes on JB Sauceda. That's not the way that we needed to do this. So rather than do some kind of mini documentary on me, what instead we thought was going to be a really good idea would be to feature people who have and share some of my values of just kind of friendship and kindness and exploration, and values and things that I think a lot of Texans will, resonate with. And so, yeah, we're going to kind of, you'll reading between the lines, get a sense of like who the people that kind of shaped me and who I am as a Texan. But it'll be through some, three pretty incredible stories, people that are just really fascinating. And one person who was really at the kind of a tent pole kind of person in my hometown, someone who really built a big community and was sort of a massive part of what made LaPorte. One person was a educator, person who really opened my eyes to the way to look at the world and kind of explore it and using photography as a means to do that. And then the third is a person who has just been sort of a mentor and close friend over the years who really helped me develop a love for both just West Texas and Texas history and Texas culture in a really great way, and has just a litany of great stories. So we didn't shoot it all at once. It's been a series of shoots, including the third one we're going to go shoot in West Texas in a few weeks. But that's the one that I'm most excited about. I'm really antsy to show people those stories and get them in the mix. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to bring it back 20 years ago. What brought you originally to Austin? And I know you from Texas Humor, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Are you still involved with that? Or is this now full time with the radio?
Yeah. No, so I came to Austin to go to UT. I graduated from LaPorte in 2003 and got into school at UT. I was just outside the top 10%, so I kind of barely eked my way in. But I got in and had a great time there. I was there for 4 years, and it was a fantastic place to go to school. I mean, I think really all the state colleges at UT or in Texas rather are great. But I really enjoyed being there. I was there when Vince Young, beat both Michigan and USC.
It was
and
good timing.
It was awesome time to be there at school. Mac Brown was such a fun coach to be there and see. And but yeah, so I moved to go there, and then and then just stuck around. I worked in advertising, so out of the kind of four-ish main, 5-ish main cities in Texas, like Austin was the place if you were going to be in advertising and photography. So I stuck around, and all my buddies that I grew up with that went into, petroleum engineering and everything, they all had to move back to Houston. And I got lucky and got to stick it around in Austin and stay here and be close to all the great watering holes and stuff that I'd grown really fond of. So as far as Texas Humor, yeah, I'm still involved. I've kind of put a pause on it for a couple of months just to kind of get my head wrapped around Texas Country Reporter, and it's been pretty time consuming to take on that responsibility and start to ramp up the work around that. But yeah, I plan to kind of ramp things back up here this spring, and you'll see more of me on both of those channels.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
What was the excuse me, the origin story with Texas Humor? I mean, was that just a random idea you had one day and went for it?
Yeah, it was really. I mean, I've got a pretty good track record over the years of being able to build communities around specific subjects and that I'm interested in. And so as a photographer, I built a decent audience of people who were interested in my work, and they followed and kind of, came along with me that way. And then with Texas Humor, it was just kind of a continuation of that. It was like, early days of Twitter. And, I saw an opportunity to build something that was kind of unique and interesting, and started it just kind of for fun in 2011, and it just kind of exploded and, grew from there. So I'd say our most active channels now are really Instagram and TikTok, but excuse me, over the years, it's kind of meandered, based off of what channel seemed to be, the one that most people were interested in at the time. So
I've done a poor job of kind of following the different ones. I'd started the Hike Austin Instagram account, just similar story, just kind of did it one day and it blew up on me. And I've done a poor job though of trying to keep up with the different. It's hard. Media it takes a lot of work to do it correctly and really kind of grow that audience. I've been bad the last couple of years too. I've gotten pretty burned out with it and haven't really done much. But yeah, it's a fun account. I followed Texas Humor for a while, and that's probably, I'm sure that's where I saw you for the first time on there. Like,
yeah, probably so. Yeah.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
What big shoots do you have coming up for Texas Country Reporter? I mean, are there any big ones you're looking forward to?
I'm excited about West Texas. I mean, I really like the Big Bend region in particular, and we're going to be out there for about a week in a couple of weeks, and so that's really exciting. And I think my goal is actually to try to weave aviation in quite a bit more. I'm a pilot and I love flying, and Texas is just such a big state, and a lot of the landscape you can't even really see. I mean, there's obviously the Chizos Mountains and stuff, but like the Chinati Mountains, for example, those are on private property, and there are a lot of really the Devil's River, is another one where like it's mostly surrounded by private property, so you can't really see it unless you're flying over it or kayaking down it for the most part. So, I think for me, it's less about individual segments and more about what we want to do with the show and really like where we want to take it. I think I've always been a big fan of the podcast This American Life. That one of the things I really like about the way that they produce that show is they'll collect 3 or 4 segments and do individual stories per episode. Each episode's maybe 45 minutes long, but they'll kind of work around a theme, and they'll say, all right, today's this week's theme is reconnecting, and and it's 3 stories. One might be some guy who is a repair technician for a phone company, and it's about reconnecting because he's fixing phones and running into crazy stories. And another might be some long lost couple who broke up when they were teenagers and got back together when they were 70. So like that's a slight angle that we want to kind of maybe take with the show and play around a little bit with that. We don't want to change the format really, and we want the stories to still be the types of stories that we've always done. But I'm excited to kind of give ourselves a little bit of that challenge and trying to tie some of the stories together in that way, and that's already kind of developing in some respects. I mean, there's we didn't intend for it to work this way, but in West Texas. We have one story that we're going to do, and there are some people that we're going to kind of bring in to that story to be there, around while we're interviewing this one person. And then the more that we dug into those people, the people that were going to kind of be in the background, we realized like, oh man, they've actually got a really interesting story on their own, And so although the show isn't, that episode won't necessarily be about like teaching everybody about Big Bend, it just happens to be that there's this really interesting collection of people that are connected through ranching and cowboy life, and all 3 of them have wildly different things that they would be kind of talking about, and so it's just kind of working out to be able to do some of this like more thematic storytelling in that regard. So
how are you guys figuring out the stories and who to interview? I mean, what's the back end kind of team look like? Are you just getting emails and you're funneling them through there? Or, I mean, kind of curious how these stories come together.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually pretty interesting. So the production team there had historically been, I think there were 3 cinematographers and then 3 producers, plus Bob and Kelly. And we treat it like kind of any sort of editorial pitch process. So, we got together when I got the job and started talking about how we wanted to handle it. And I told the team, I said, look, like I can't boil the ocean. I need all the help that I can get. So I don't want to be the only one selecting or sourcing stories. And I'd like for them to sort of be across a broad swath of the state. I don't want it to just be isolated to where I live either. So we kind of divide and conquer. And we have a couple different ways that we do it. There's the stuff that people just send. I mean, I'll get messages on Facebook and people texting saying, "Hey, I got this idea. Can you look into it or whatever?" And then you've got like the sort of stuff where it's like, "Hey, we did a story a long time ago. It'd be really interesting to go revisit this person, re-interview them. It was 30 years ago. I wonder what they're doing now." And then the third bucket is really just us going and proactively looking for story ideas, right? So the stuff in West Texas, that's what that is. Like it's there's a guy that I photographed probably 12, 13 years ago and has a really fascinating story, but I shot a portrait of him. So most people have not seen the video kind of manifestation of what this guy does, you know. So for me, I wanted to do a segment on him and show people, you know, his skill and his talent. And so I just went back into my archives and was like, oh, you know what? This guy'd be great. You know, so he reached out and he's like, yeah,
Nice.
I'd love to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So now the thing that I tell people is that I want all the ideas. You can go to my website, you can go to jbsauceda.com and send me a message. A lot of people just go to my personal site and send me a note. You can DM me on Instagram. You can DM the Texas Country Reporter, you know, Instagram account, whatever. The main thing that we ask is, like, you just think about the people behind the story. You know, who is the person, you know, that's interesting. Like, again, love y'all's favorite restaurants. Send them, because I still got to eat. So, you know, at a minimum, I'll go stop by them.
Yeah.
But like, it's really impactful when we've got that person, you know, behind it. Like, there was this great story idea that we're hoping to do about somebody who repairs some bicycles and, you know, just gives them away for free. You know,
Oh,
it's
wow.
like people discard these bikes. This dude just repairs them and sets them out, and kids who need them, they can have them. You know, pretty neat, just selfless story.
cool.
You know, and that was somebody just sent me an email. They were like, "Hey, congratulations on the new job. I have an idea for you," and they sent it to me.
Nice.
You know.
Have y'all done anything with the King Ranch or the 4.6s?
I've not. I'm sure that at some point Bob probably has done some kind of thing, you know. And you know, some of them, anything that's really well known like that. Again, if it's been covered, it's likely a person kind of attached to it.
That's
or
what I was
something,
thinking.
you
The
know?
history between the two of them. I'm sure there's some old cowboy there with crazy
Yeah.
stories. That's a crucial part of the operation. That would be awesome to interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, I mean, I would love to. You know, I mean, we want all of the above. You know, we want anything and everything, any kind of ideas, any sort of funny stories, or, you know, hey, did you know that this took place here or there or whatever. Like, everybody's got a story to tell, and you don't have to be some quirky character, and you don't have to be a cowboy, frankly. I mean, like, there are some really interesting people that do some pretty incredible things around the state.
That might be the
And
cook at the King Ranch. Has been there for 40
Yeah.
years.
Yeah,
Might have the best
exactly.
Stories ever.
Cooking for all
Yeah.
the cowboys and stuff. Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. One of the hunting guys, maybe.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
like that'd be cool.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, it's, you know, I think it's going to be a fun year. I feel super blessed to be in the role. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to be able to do this sort of thing.
Yeah,
you know?
that's very cool.
So,
How long have you been flying for?
I got my license in 2014. So,
He's in the middle of getting his license.
Oh,
right
really?
now.
Cool.
Yeah.
where are you doing that at?
Out of Rusty Allen.
Where's that?
That's Lago.
Oh, okay,
Lago,
gotcha.
North Shore Travis.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool.
I've got a buddy of mine that has got a hangar out there, and so I've always, you know, I've flown quite a bit. I mean, just for fun, because I've got buddies with planes and whatnot. And I just always would use my photography as my foot in the door. I mean, I used to drive around. That's how it actually started, was at Rusty Allen and then Lakeway. I would just go, because you can just drive out onto the tarmac or whatever, drive around to the hangars. So several years ago, I did that one day, and every hangar that was open, I just stopped and said, hey, I take photos and I like flying. You know,
Cool.
I'll wash your plane. I'll do whatever. Just take me flying, you know. And
Yeah.
it worked out. I made a bunch of friends with their plane. You know, people with planes are normally very cool people and nice and want to share their
Yep.
passion, you know. And if you show interest, they really extend it. And see, I made one friend in particular that was a flight instructor, and we were flying quite a bit just for fun. He was building his hours to go commercial, though, so he hit his 1,500 hours and sold that plane, and now he's working for Southwest or something. But so I picked it back up again recently, officially, to try to push it through. But it's
somebody told me a long time ago when I was training that it's one of the most exclusive fraternities ever. You know, just the number of people, when you think about the grand scheme of things, of how many human beings have been on this planet, but how few have ever actually been in control of a vehicle that allows you to take off and land. You know,
It's less than 0.5% of the population, right?
yeah, it's unbelievably small.
tiny.
You know, and so in the grand scheme of history, that's like a pretty cool and like motivating thing to do, you know. And I get it; it's not for everybody. I mean, some people don't like it. It's like it's too scary or it seems complicated or whatever.
Turbulence in a small plane is a little bit different.
Yeah, it can kind of freak you out a little bit if you're not you don't know what to expect. But
he has me very interested.
Yeah.
But some of the planes he sends me a picture of these flying, and I'm like,
yeah.
Well, you see a Cessna 152 that was built in '59, and he's like, I ain't getting in that thing. I'm like, it runs great. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually in the market right now for one. I just flew up to visit the owner on Sunday morning. It's a 1965, you know. But the way that these things are built, like the plane, the body itself. I mean, these things don't fall apart. They're like, I mean, if you look at the statistics, I mean, the crash and sort of accident statistics, it's never a plane breaking up in flight. You know, it's always pilot error. You know, somebody doing something they shouldn't have. Somebody took off without checking to make sure there was no fuel or water in the tanks. You know, and it's been sitting outside for 6 months. Of course, some water works in there, and gas is combustible. Water is not. You know, and the engine goes out and they wreck or whatever. So it's the saying is that there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old bold pilots. And I certainly want to be an old one, and so I tend to err on the side of caution quite a bit.
Yeah, so. I'll take a 2024 with the parachute.
Yeah, that's what he's.
Yeah,
he's like, we'll go flying when we're buying like $1 million plane. I'm like, no, well, I'm telling you, there's great planes.
You know, those Cirrus planes are nice, and a lot of people get kind of into a sense of security with them. They're actually. I wouldn't say that they're dangerous because they're not dangerous. People fly them perfectly fine all the time, but they're high performance. They're a little harder to fly than like a high wing Cessna. And in a hairy situation, I'd much rather be in the 1965 Cessna high wing plane than a 2015 or 2020 Cirrus like fiberglass. You know, like they're different. They've got some different tolerances in the way that you fly them, and they're by no means dangerous, but I get that comment a lot. They're like, "Oh, you getting the one with the parachute?" I'm like, "You don't need a parachute. It's got wings."
Personal parachute.
Yeah.
I'm jumping.
That. Yeah. Any plane you go in, yeah, you're out.
It goes off. I'm out the door.
That's fair. Yeah, I'll give you the parachute.
It is cool with the new planes, though. They have those parachutes built in the actual plane. But I mean, isn't the statistics that most wrecks or a lot of them happen on takeoff or final when you're coming in, so the parachute's not going to help.
Yeah, it's stalling when you're only 1,000 or 2,000 feet out. It's not going to do any good, you know. But they are nice. I mean, if you get in a hairy situation, you get into some situation with I don't know. I mean, this sort of thing happens where you go engine out. You're not over a rural area. If you're over an urban area, you don't have anywhere to land, you know. And a helicopter, even when the engine goes out, can still float its way down. But with a plane, you need at least 500-600 feet to land and roll. If you're urban area, that's hard to do.
So a helicopter doesn't just spiral out of control?
No, it's called auto rotate. Auto rotation, I think, is the name of it. And I forget exactly how it works. But they can actually land them still. It doesn't just fall out of the sky.
So
Kobe's helicopter didn't have the auto
No, that
rotation?
crashed into a mountain. Yeah.
And the weird one on that one is like I'm trying to remember exactly, but like they were like picking up. It was weird the way they came down. Like they flew into if I remember correctly, there's two types of flying. There's what's called visual flight rules and instrument flight rules. And visual flight rules is a day like this. You go up in the air. Your job is to visually create separation between you, objects, and other planes. And so you're looking out the window. You might have like radar, ADS-B, or whatever that can tell you, oh, there's another aircraft around, but your protection is you looking out the window. That's the way it works. In instrument flight rules, it's anytime you can't see out the window. So that might be clouds, that might be fog, that could be rain. But when there's instrument flight rules, your responsibility is to create separation, or is to work with air traffic control, and they give you clearances, and they're telling you exactly where to fly, and all that stuff is super coordinated and super, like clear and managed by air traffic control. And if I remember correctly, in Kobe's pilot's situation, I believe they took off on what was a really more of like an IFR day. There were some clouds that were there, and they took off VFR and tried to stay under them, which you can do. I mean, this happens all the time where there's a cloud layer at 3,000 feet. Well, you can fly under that. You just can't fly through it unless you get an IFR clearance. And if I remember correctly, I think that they took off
in an IFR kind of marginal day, and they flew VFR. And then I believe they crashed into the side of a mountain, which is, or like hill or something like that. And it was less that they fell out of the sky and more that they were flying in what's considered like marginal conditions, which is not safe, So, but you'll hear this term sometimes with flying called get there-itis, and it's like an affliction of like, I really got to go. Like I think I can pull it off, and nine times out of 10, that's the bold pilot. Like I think I can get there, And so my wife gives me a hard time because I watch these YouTube videos that are all crash analysis, and it's like, I don't get freaked out by that because I like to learn from these types of mistakes, and it's, like I said, I mean, you'll hear, some guy flying an older plane, maybe some of the gaskets on the gas tank are not as great, and he's been leaving it outside, and it's rained a bunch, and he was in a rush to get somewhere and didn't go sump the tanks and check for water, takes off, the engine starts up fine, takes off, everything's good, and then eventually that water makes its way into the engine. It just happens to be in the climb out, and he's only 500 feet up, lose the engine, you don't have a lot of time to think, and you might overreact or whatever. And
it's always such a crazy thing too when you read on those on like what actually went wrong. And, my grandfather was a pilot in World War II. He was a B-17 pilot, but during his flight training, I forgot what type of plane it was in, but someone had taken a seat cushion off the plane and threw it in the back, and it had rested on the cable, and it I'm trying to remember. I guess it was the yoke. It was just like a single one, but the cable for that going to the back of the plane, the cushion was on it. Over time, it destroyed the cable. As he was going, the cable just snapped. I mean, he had no control. Nosedive, survived somehow, got out of the plane. But it's always just crazy stories.
It's always really subtle stuff, But that's why the checklists and things like that matter. You got to have a way in which you're checking these things, and because it's always something simple, And so, but I like it as a for me, just the practice of going through the checklist and doing all that is like, it's kind of just, I don't know, it's like a weird type of meditation almost. You pull up and you park and walk around the plane, put your hands on everything and just kind of feel it. And
you don't want to become a story or statistics.
Yeah, not at all. By no means, And I mean, when I told my wife that I wanted to go buy a plane at some point, she's like, I'm fine with it, but I want us to buy the least sexy, most minivan, like type of boring plane possible, And so we met in the middle, and we got one that's like, I mean, the type of plane I'm looking at right now is it's a high wing Cessna, and it's fast, but it's not crazy, and it's safe, and
like a 172 or something.
182, 182. The one I'm looking at's great. Only downside with it is it's maroon, and as a Longhorn, I know my buddies are going to give me a hard time. But
you can fix that.
My Aggie buddies will, they'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
So
Too funny.
Yeah.
Do you have any crazy close call stories or any fun pilot stories from over the years?
No, like crazy close calls or close story call stories, but I think my favorite one that I talk about is my flight around Texas. And when I got my license, Texas Monthly reached out and had been curious about what I was doing with my license, and I mentioned to them that I was starting to shoot some photography, and they were like, "Oh, we've got this story we need shot out in West Texas." And I was like, "Really? What is it?" And they said, "Oh, this woman, she's an archaeologist, and she has this story that she did where she went and dug up like some sort of geological site out close to the Chinati Mountains, and it was on private property, and so the only way to get there very easily was to fly in. And so her and the other, archaeologists and geologists people, they flew a plane in, they landed it, backcountry flying. And so this woman wrote this story, and then they needed a photo to go with it to kind of represent what she had done. So I flew my brother-in-law's plane. He had a 182. I flew it out there. I put a GoPro on the tail and have this really great, wide image of that shot, going through this canyon. Excuse me. And so I shot that, and then I heard from the editors and other people. They were like, "Man, this is one of our favorite photos we've ever done. Like, what a cool perspective." Because you could see the plane and everything and all these mountains and everything around it. And so they were like, "Do you have any other ideas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've got one." And around that time, I'd been flying with my buddy Pete Vincent, who was born in Dallas, but he grew up in Hawaii, and he had gone to UT with me. And so I was joking with him because Texas Humor was taking off around this time, and I was just definitely known as like the Texas guy. And so we talk a lot about Texas, and him living back in Texas now, and still kind of just increasing his Texanness, having spent so much time in Hawaii. And I was just joking around about cockiness and being, Texas bravado, Texas kind of brashness, whatever. And I made this joke about there was a woman at the time who was going to go fly around the world. Her name was literally Amelia Earhart. She was named after the original Amelia Earhart. And I told him, I was like, it'd be so funny. What if I flew around the state of Texas and called that the flight around the world? Instead of literally flying around the world, if I just flew the border.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, that'd be hilarious," So I kind of just tucked it away in my brain. So a handful of months later, once I got my license, and Texas Monthly asked me if I had any ideas, I pitched them on it, and they were like, "Dude, what a great idea! Let's do it." So, so we spent a few months, like 5 or 6 months, kind of planning out what that would look like and how we would do it, and then eventually Texas Monthly said, "Yeah, we're all in. Let's go." So I ended up. Taking off, it took 6 days and 36 flight hours all the way around. And so I'd wake up. I would basically fly for 3 hours in the morning. This was in July, and so it was a pretty hot time to fly. So I'd get up in the morning before it was hot. I'd hop in the plane, fly for about 3.5 hours, land, hang out, go get lunch, rest, whatever, dump the photos and stuff from my cards, and then hop back in the plane around 5 or 6 o'clock, and then take off and fly for another, couple of hours to the next destination. So I started in Victoria, Texas, which is, inland, but I started in Victoria, flew out towards Mustang Island, and like kind of Port Aransas, and then flew up the coast, landed eventually.
Did you go counterclockwise?
I went counterclockwise, yeah. I flew up towards Marshall, Texas, which is in East Texas, landed there, stayed overnight in Marshall, then got up the next morning, flew from there to Wichita, kind of the Wichita Falls area, rested, and then flew up into the Panhandle, stayed in Dalhart overnight. From Dalhart, flew down, hung out and had lunch in Andrews, Texas, and then flew that evening around the Guadalupe Mountains to El Paso. Then from El Paso, flew to Marfa, did the Big Bend region, and then from Marfa, flew around down to Brownsville. So it was an amazing couple of days, and it just, I felt like one with the machine. I have this really vivid memory, actually, of flying over the Panhandle and kind of the Permian Basin area and kind of turning, when you think about Texas, like turning that corner right there close to Andrews where it's kind of this square corner cutting into the state, and listening to Tanya Tucker's Delta Dawn, just over my headset. And I just had this honky-tonk playlist that I played the whole time as I was flying. And yeah, it was just such a special trip. It was, I feel really lucky to have gotten to do it. And, saw some really amazing weather and saw, some of the best views of the state that one person, could see. So it was a really amazing time.
Did you fly by yourself the whole time?
Yeah. I took, at the time we had a travel writer named Jordan Breel who was working there. So she flew with me from Victoria up the Gulf Coast, and then I dropped her back off. And then in Marfa, there's this really well-known outdoor rider named Rick Bass, who's from, I think, Wyoming or something like that. And I think he had a connection to Texas as well. And he met me in Marfa, and I took him up. I told him it was Sunday morning, so we flew over Big Bend. So I told him, I was like, let's go to church. And so we hopped in the plane and took off, and we flew over the, Santa Helena Canyon and the river and all that. It was just a really special way to spend a Sunday morning flying over that part of the state.
Did you have to get clearance flying along the border, or is that before it got pretty crazy?
No, I mean, there's no real requirement. I mean, you're technically not supposed to fly, unless you have what's called a radio operator's license, into other countries. So I'd hug the border, but I wasn't like flying over into Mexico per se. But the way that air traffic or airspace works, it's not really controlled in that way. It's more about like there is a worldwide collaboration between all air traffic controllers. English is the standard language, regardless of where you fly. They're all speaking English. They're these kind of standardized ways in which they all collaborate. But when you're flying VFR the way that I was, you don't really have to talk to anybody. Now, I did because I was flying and using a camera. So I would request what's called flight following, which is when you're talking to air traffic control, you're flying by visual flight rules. You're still responsible for creating separation, making sure no one else is crashing into you. But they're talking to you. You're identified on their radar as a specific number. So they'll give you a number to what's called squawk, and you put your number in there, and on the radar you've got this number, and they know this is 39er Bravo Bravo. They're flying in this area, and they're just kind of watching you. And if a plane flies close, they'll say, hey, 39er Bravo Bravo, we've traffic, 12 o'clock. We're not talking to them. They're at 4,500. Just keep an eye out, and they're just kind of chatting with you. So when I was close to the border, to avoid having a bunch of black Suburbans show up when I landed, I would typically call air traffic control and let them know, hey, I'm doing, aerial photography or whatever. But out in Big Bend, there's really not even all that great a radar,
I'd be scared of the cartel shooting at you.
It's not bad. Have you ever been out there?
It's been a long time since I've been to South Texas.
It's I go across the border all the time. It's not what's on the news. I mean, I go to Boquillas and cross over on a boat into Mexico, and it's fine. It's I'm sure there's places where it's dangerous, but down there in Big Bend, it's pretty quiet. It's a nice part of the state. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
How are you expecting to kind of weave your aviation into Texas Country Reporter?
I think a couple ways. I think there's the practical part of it, which is like
just getting to A to B,
getting from A to B. Driving to Lubbock from here is kind of a drag. So it's pretty drive. But I've got kids and a wife who want me home, as well. And so when it makes sense and it's easier for us to get up there, I'll just fly up there. I want the whole state to feel represented. I want every corner of it, to feel like it's got some sort of action on the show and not like, it's just Fort Worth, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston that are getting all the love, So that's one part, which is just the practical side. And then there's the kind of more, personal side for me that I just love if we can find some ways to make it interesting, right? So like Bob, for example, did a segment on Boquillas, the border crossing I was talking about, a long time ago. It was probably in the early 90s, I think, that he went out there. And I thought, maybe it'd be kind of fun to go do that again, but to fly to Terlingua, and land right there outside of Big Bend and then rent a Jeep and drive, to the border. But I always go to that part of the state in November, and when we're out there, we'll normally take an afternoon and go cross over, go get some tequila and eat some enchiladas and stuff, and then come back or whatever. But I thought maybe that'd be kind of a fun deal to do and kind of tell it from the perspective of a pilot. Like, all right, we're in Austin right now. We're hopping a plane, and in 2 hours we'll be in Terlingua. It's like not often
awesome
that you can say you can get that far that quickly.
People don't realize how freeing flying is in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's really, as you mentioned before, it's pretty unrestricted. You can just pick up and fly wherever you want to. And my other grandfather had a Cessna back in the day, and him and my grandmother would always, that was their weekend thing. They'd take off on Saturday, they'd go fly to some small Texas town, they'd land, they'd have lunch, and they'd fly home. That was just what they did every Saturday. And it's just cool. Or when my mom and aunt were in college at Texas State, my grandparents at the time were in Conroe. And so they would just fly in, visit them for the day, fly, and they land in San Marcos and fly home. And I've always known I wanted to be a pilot and get my license, just because, all three of my grandfathers, one of them Step, obviously, were pilots. And so I, as a kid, just was always seeing it and just thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah, it's very freeing in that way. And I would be in Big Bend every other weekend if I could, to be honest. I just love being out in that part of the state, but it's so dang far. It's a 7 to 8 hour commitment from here, like between lunch breaks and gas breaks and everything else all the way out. So it just takes forever to get there. And in my opinion, that's part of the charm. It's kind of a natural filtering process, right? As Rambler says, this is y'all's plug, Texas limestone filtered, right? Like West Texas is kind of like I-10 filtered. It's like people are like, man, I don't want to drive all the way out there. I'm like, all right, well, you probably don't need to be out there. That's fine. So for me, I like that. I like that it's remote, and I would love to be out there a lot more. But between baseball and t-ball games and dance practice and stuff for our kids, it's harder to get out there. But to your point about aviation, it's like it can kind of make a weekend trip out of what would typically be like a week-long trip,
absolutely.
And so, but I think where my career is right now with travel and everything, the flip side of being on the road a lot is that it can be hard to see family and stuff as much as I would like. And so to your point about going and just visiting somebody, this is part of the motivating factor for me for flying is it'll get me home to my parents more often, right? I can buzz home, see them real quick, and then get back, so.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're starting to run short on time. Is there anything we missed or anything you want to talk about or plugs,
what do you guys, what are the things that y'all appreciated most about growing up in Central Texas? What are the things that stick out to you about that need highlighting, that need kind of featuring?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been the outdoors. That's kind of always been my shtick, a little bit. I think we have some really incredible places around here that a lot of people don't realize. I also think that we have a ton of private property, which is kind of a double-edged sword. It's a blessing and a curse a little bit, But for me, it just for person. I mean, every house I grew up in as a kid backed up to a greenbelt, and so for me growing up, it was my parents were like, "Hey, when the streetlights come home or turn on, you need to be home. Other than that, go do whatever," And so for me, like, I don't know if that's really Central Texas specific or just living near green spaces, but I guess for me, that's always what really stood out. And I feel like the generations now, it's less of that, maybe, I don't know. But for me, that was always a big part of the hill country for me, was the swimming in the Frio River, taking trips with family, or just the nature aspect of it. I think it's really, if you live here, I think you appreciate it. But if you live in Florida or some other state and you think of Texas, you don't think of natural beauty and these crystal clear swimming holes and all of that. So for me, I guess that's probably the main thing that stands out.
Yeah. What about you?
For me, it's definitely the hill country. Growing up hunting, fishing, I can count the number of times we went to the beach on one hand. It was always heading west. And so between Barton Springs, the Greenbelt, and then just the Mason, Menard, Brady area, just getting out west past Llano.
What kind of fishing did y'all do?
All bass.
Yeah, all bass. Yeah.
You catch a catfish every once in a while, but all bass fishing.
That was that's one story I'll tell. I'll give you guys a little bit of a hat tip on is we went out tilapia spearfishing last weekend. That was fun, and because tilapia is invasive.
Yeah, so I know they're in Travis. I've seen them before.
Yeah, they're in Travis. We were down in New Braunfels, and it's a pretty cool story. The guy who's doing it is a total character. I mean, he's from I don't think it was Corsicana, but it's somewhere up there, kind of closer to Dallas, and he came to school here. In San Marcos, and went to Texas State, got his background in biology, and just was like obsessed. And he's got this really interesting kind of contract and relationship with the city of New Braunfels. But he taught me I'd never spearfished before. I did it once when I was like,
So are you spearfishing like snorkeling doing it, or are you on a boat?
No,
you're like
snorkeling. You're like you're in the canal and like getting these invasive fish out. I got a big one. I mean, those things were massive.
They're pretty good eating too. Did y'all eat them?
Yeah. So he, and this will be part of the story. He does a big contest every year to kind of like incentivize people to get these things out of the water. And I was like, "What do y'all do with all this fish?" He told us it was like thousands of pounds of fish they capture. Wow. And he's like, "Oh, we cook them. And we fillet them, and some of them go into tacos. Some are just fried, and people eat them that way. With cornmeal or whatever."
Awesome.
But it was awesome. It was like in that water, right there at the spring, there in the canal, was like unbelievably clear. I mean, it was just so anyway, that was one. You were asking a question about stories that I really liked. That story was awesome.
I bet that was a fun day too, just going spearfishing.
It was
a good time.
Well, and it was funny too because it was like 45 degrees out when we got there, so we had to wear like wetsuits. We get in the water was like 68.
Warm,
I mean, it was warmer than being standing outside. So I was chilly getting dressed into a wetsuit when it was that cold. But got in the back of my car, put it on, and then we got out and then got in the water. Man, it was a blast.
Did y'all go up into Spring Lake, or did y'all stay mainly in the river?
We were just there in the river. Yeah, but he does work there in the Canal, and he does work in the San Marcos River.
Yeah. So does he have a contract to kill these fish, or does he take people out as a guide?
Yeah, no, it's a contract deal, and so he's out there like helping knock down the population. He's like, we're never going to get rid of them, but we're there to knock them down.
Can people hire him to go with them, or is he?
I think I don't think that he's allowed. Yeah, I won't speak for him, but I think that the setup is like he's the one that has to go do it, or his like company.
Gotcha.
Because some of the parts of the river that he goes into, no one's allowed to swim in.
They pay him by the fish, or what?
No, I don't. He didn't get into all that. But it was a pretty good deal for him. I mean, this dude is just, he was all about it. He just loves this life.
Sounds like a blast.
He drops his necklace of fish heads at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, dude. I mean, he had like. Before he got up so he could have fish when we got there to the chute to show us, and he'd already killed like 30 or 40 of them.
I didn't realize it was that big of a problem, and I also didn't realize they got that big. I always thought they were smaller fish.
Oh no, I mean the one that I got was this big.
What's the problem with them? Are they eating
It's a mixture of things. I mean the bass are there, and so like the bass have kind of a way that the landscape under the water should look, and those tilapia I guess kind of bed in the dirt. And so they change the landscape just in the way that they live. These things are native to, I think, Africa. And so...
How in the world do they get in that?
Supposedly, according to him, it was for the purposes of, like, helping cut down on vegetation. I think they thought that they would, like... Or they do eat some type of grasses or something. So
that's like Lake Austin with the carp.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's the same type of deal. I think it was 100, 200 years ago, somebody introduced them for the purposes of that, thinking it would help. And here we are all these years later, and it's like it's literally changed the landscape of the river because those fish are used to a specific type of landscape. They had predators back where they're from. Here they don't. They're the biggest fish there, and nothing's killing them. So they crowd out for resources. They change the underwater landscape, and then as a result, make it bad for the native fish to live. So it's them, and then there's a specific type of catfish. I forget what they said it was. It was like the armored catfish, I think was the name of the other one. Both of those, they get kind of outsized. They change the landscape, and it's just a net bad thing for the native fish that then end up just dying or getting crowded out. So he's like, we would love to eradicate them, but we're not going to be able to. These things lay, millions of eggs every time they are breeding. So our job is to just knock the population down, just keep it low, and in the meantime, they help people develop a love for the native species. And there's some gar down there. There's the bass. You could see him. I was down there. Wow. All this beautiful grass, just waving in the water and stuff, and you're snorkeling down with all the other fish. Awesome. The funny thing is that the natives are not really scared of you. They're down there like, oh, hey, what's up? It's all the tilapia and the fish that are being hunted because they know, and they're like hiding in the grass.
Well, you're probably the only predator at this point for them.
Yeah, and the ones that are left are the ones that are all the best at hiding because they've survived. So they just it's kind of like deer. They're all super spooked just knowing they're being hunted. So
I need to get a hold of this guy. I kind of want to go on I don't know if he just got trips, but
I'll give you his info.
We were just in Florida and we were looking up iguana hunts because it's like again invasive and people go out with air rifles and. We ended up not doing it. We went bass fishing instead. When
we were in high school, we used to be able to go down on Scenic Drive in Terrytown and throw a frog right there and catch back-to-back 5-pound bass.
Really?
And now you go down there, fish all day.
Yeah.
You can't catch anything.
I don't. Do you think it's that there's no fish in there, or do you think it's that
all the grass got eaten by the carp? And so it was, I don't remember the history of it, but it was 10 plus years ago they introduced carp trying to get rid of a lot of the grass in Lake Austin. Now a huge portion is all sand bottom, so bass don't have anywhere to live.
Got it.
It used to be a fantastic trophy lake, and now it's
it used to be one of the best fishing like trophy lakes in Texas.
I grew up going down the street and would just kill. I was used to catching 5-pound bass. I thought it was no big deal. Now I have a bass boat, and I can't.
Yeah.
You can pay me to, and I can't go catch one.
Yeah, I mean it's these like kind of second order effects people don't realize. I mean it affects the landscape in a big way, and it was fascinating talking to there've been a number of people I've interviewed here recently, and there are some of these concepts, and in the day and age of people being politically really divided, there's some things like that everybody can agree on. Things like we want the state to be really beautiful, be taken care of. Resources to be managed well, so for generations, they have the experiences that we had growing up. It wasn't in Central Texas, but I fished the Gulf Coast. We'd get up, my buddy Jonathan Pfeiffer, we'd get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and go grab the boat and fish for a couple hours before school, and put the boat up on the slip and then go into to school right there around the corner from the water, those are the types of things I want my kids to be able to grow up with, and the sort of things we want to promote with the show.
Fishing the Texas coast is so much fun. I grew up going to Port O'Connor. I'm in Florida quite a bit. That was my childhood spot. And so, man, I love redfish fishing and all that.
One of my high school biology teachers caught one of the tagged redfish. The Conservancy, and won the truck and the boat and the whole thing. Yeah, it was cool. So.
I need to have a good experience to the coast. He talked me into coast fishing, and we went down there and we caught a whole whopping 0.
Where did we go again? I'm trying to remember. trying to remember where
we were
went.
invited somewhere else from different.
Oh, we went
from
to
where you went.
we went to Rockport out on that.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, we need to go.
You can go to
O'Connor,
Port A or kind of get it. Yeah, but Rockport's got some good fishing. They've got some good guides down there too. But
I'm bad luck down there
yeah,
apparently.
Apparently, yeah.
I think for us, that was also part of the group we went with was
Yeah. A little rowdier.
Yeah. But it was a good time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I
Of
appreciate
course.
y'all having me in. So,
Yeah, thanks for coming
so
on.
much. Yeah.
What
It's great to
contact
meet you.
info? Do you want to plug anything? Or how to get
Look
hold
me
of
up
you?
on you can find me on X or Instagram. It's just my full name, JAYBSAUCEDA. And
Okay.
so follow me there, send me DMs, send me your ideas, and look forward to having everybody hopping in the car and following along for TCR.
Right on. Well, good luck with the new show or new host on the show, and we'll definitely be watching. So thank you,
Sounds
sir.
good. Thanks, y'all.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Sweet.